Welcome back. Well, you know, we're facing fall pretty soon, and another 30 or 40 days or so, these leaves will all be bright, brilliant orange and yellows, and there'll be time to hunt birds and get out your bird dog. And you know, boy, have I got a special treat for you. Benny, here. Good boy. He's back. You know, you people, let's come over here where you can be seen. You guys stormed heaven. The night that I did that video and put it up, midnight that night, something happened to him out in the backyard. At the stroke of midnight, he went from having his tail down and his ears down and feeling pretty low for a dog, and all of a sudden he perked up and he was Benny again. And I thought, gee, this is too good to be an answer to my prayers and a miracle. But in fact, you know, it's been a long time since that night, and he's still doing quite well. So, you know, I'm counting on God to keep this true. But in the meantime, Benny is he's doing awesome. Right now he's just full of mud. Benny, here. Atta boy. He's been out running around having a good time. You'd never know that he had, just over a month ago, that he had his spleen taken out, and he had his stitches removed. Actually, they were staples. He had 25 staples down his middle. He looked like a stainless steel zipper. But he's been doing great. He's been eating well. He's been gaining weight and full of energy. So anyway, what are we going to be doing today to prepare for bird season? I sometimes I get people ask me questions about, and I've had people ask me questions in stores too. What size shot do I buy? What choke do I use? I see people being given all kinds of advice across the counter, which is, for the most part, it comes from out of space. People have no understanding about chokes and shot sizes and things like that. Now, I'm not going to talk about steel shot today and waterfowl hunting, things like that, because I'm going to talk about bird hunting. Now, this is not exactly a bird gun. I wouldn't be caught dead trying to carry this around the woods all day. This is my Beretta Silver Pigeon, and it's a Sporting Clays version. This is a heavy barrel, 32-inch barrels. I'd only get 26-inch barrels is more than sufficient for in the woods, quicker to swing and things like that. But the reason I'm bringing this gun out here today is because I can show you all the multitude of different chokes and what they actually do. Now, I'm going to be demonstrating with, I've loaded up a bunch of number 6s, number 6 pellets. There's actually approximately 253 pellets. You know, I'm not going to count them, but there's roughly 253 pellets for an 1 1/8 ounce load of number 6s, and that's a typical load. These are a high velocity load, 1,270 feet per second thereabouts, and that's a good high velocity load for the field. It's 1 1/8 ounce of shot is more than sufficient for a 12 gauge shotgun. That's a good load, as a matter of fact, for 16 or even a 20 gauge, a longer 20 gauge Magnum. But that's more than enough for out in the woods. Some people even get by with 1 ounce loads. The patterning board I'm going to be using back there is 48 inches across. Now, there's a standard which is used throughout the industry to rate choke dimensions. In other words, there's a mathematical formula which is based on percentage of pellets that strike a 30-inch circle at 40 yards. Well, you know, if you look in any number of websites or books or magazines, they're going to tell you about how many percent of the pellets are, your 50%, 40%, 50%, 60%, 70% or more in a 30-inch circle at 40 yards. That means absolutely nothing to anybody in a practical sense. What does that mean out in the field? And if that's all you have to go by, you're going to be lost. what I want to do today is I'll show you what various pellet patterns look like at typical hunting ranges for which you would use a specific choke. Now, right now, I've got this paper set up at 15 yards. It's a little bit hard to discern with a with a camera, because you're basically looking at something which has got a magnification which is different than our eyes. But I'm going to pace it off for you. You're going to see that it's roughly 15 paces. That's 1 yard per pace. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. You know, you hear a lot about how far you're going to be shooting a bird. Well, if I could ever see that far in early fall woods, when the leaves are just starting to turn color and they're still sticking to the trees, that's as far as you're ever going to possibly see up through the trees as a partridge is taking off. That's as far as you're going to see in many places where quail are taking off in the woods in the early fall season. So at that range, the pattern that is most often recommended for so many people when they buy a first shotgun, they buy an all-purpose shotgun. They buy a modified choke. That's what they recommend for people to buy, is a modified choke, which will at this range put all its pellets into basically a very small circle, and just if you could ever hit the bird, there'd be nothing to have to bring home, nothing to eat. You'd massacre it. So what I've got loaded here is cylinder bore on the bottom, skeet bore on the top, and I'm going to fire one of each. And let me just check and make sure that these, yeah, I've got cylinder bore on the bottom. Let me just check that again. I don't want to mess up my experiment here. This is indeed cylinder. So I've got cylinder bore. Now what does cylinder mean? It means what it implies. It's like a straight can, like a soup can. It's the same dimension as it exits the bore. So it's as wide a pattern as you can get. You know, that cylinder bore is typically what's used in so-called riot shotguns, police shotguns, and things of that sort. So let's line up here, and we're going to fire first one cylinder bore rather into the target. We'll go up and check out the target, and I'll mark them, and then we'll fire the next pattern. So this is going to be from 15 yards. Let's get a hold of Benny. Benny, here! That's the number one barrel, and I have my hearing protection on, and I'm going to be just touching that off at the bottom at that makeshift partridge in the middle. Okay, now if I was fortunate to be able to hit that bird before it got away behind a tree at 15 yards, I've only got a pattern there which is not much greater than 15 inches. And that bird has been struck now in the head by at least 5 pellets, maybe 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Suffice to say, that bird is inedible. So anybody who tries to tell you that you need to have a modified shotgun or even improved cylinder when you're going bird hunting in the woods, they're really off base. You want to be able to let that bird get out as far as you can and use as light a charge as possible. So this would behoove me to use 7/8 of an ounce shot if I were going out in the woods bird hunting at close range early fall using this choke. I'd use cylinder bore or maybe skeet, and we'll take a shot with skeet, and it's going to be pretty much even denser than this, so it'll load up the bird even more. And I'm going to position the camera so that you'll be able to see the pellets hitting. Well, that's a skeet pattern. Now, as you can see, skeet is a little bit tighter even than cylinder bore. It's the first degree of constriction of the bore, and at that range, this is the wad here. But it's a beautiful pattern. It's a beautiful, tight, uniform pattern, evenly, spaced around the center of the target where I shot. But that is by no means the number of pellets that you want to put into a bird. So you want to lighten up on your loads when you go bird hunting. Bigger is not better when it comes to bird hunting. Lighten up maybe 7/8 of an ounce load, 7/8 of an ounce of pellets. That'll reduce the pellet count considerably so that you won't be massacring your bird. So I'm going to change the paper, and we'll move up to a tighter choke yet, and we'll move back to about 30 yards. Okay, now I decided to use the same cylinder bore and skeet choke at 25 yards. Now 25 yards is really an extended range for any woodland hunting. We'll just see what the patterns do with the same choke at that range. Now they're going to open up quite a bit, but I don't feel that they would be too sparse to give you a good rich pattern at that range on birds. So let's give it a try. The first one's going to be cylinder bore, and then we'll go up and check it out. 25 yards. Okay. Now, for any of you that might think that, sometimes people think that cylinder bore and improved cylinder are very loose, and they shy from buying that size choke. The cylinder bore at 25 yards, now I've got a substantial number of hits. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. That's a lot of hits. Again, I'd still want to be using a lighter charge. This is 1 1/8 ounce, way too heavy a pellet count for that range. So cylinder bore is still an acceptable shot size, shot dispersion rather, for up to 25 yards. When you get beyond 25 yards, up to 30 yards, you're going to start seeing a sparsity of pellets. There'll be holes in the pattern, which will perhaps allow smaller birds, especially quail, to slip through. So in that case, we would probably want to go to skeet. Now skeet is, as I say, it's a somewhat tighter constriction, so let's give it a try and see. Obviously, that's a more dense pattern. It really filled up that bird. Now, if I had about 18 hits on it, now it's at least doubled the number of hits on that bird. As you can see, though, his head would have squeaked through. There's sufficient opening in there, but again, 1 1/8. Gotta unravel my tongue. 1 1/8 ounce of shot. Way too heavy a load for woodland, upland bird hunting. That's why 20 gauge guns, 28 gauge guns were so popular years ago with bird hunters. When I say bird hunters, I'm talking about upland game. So, and the 16 gauge with a 7/8 of an ounce load was beautiful. Okay, so, or even 3/4 of an ounce. So let's change the paper again, and this time I'm going to put improved cylinder on it, and I'm going to go back to its standard range of about 35 yards, which is quite a ways out. Now, improved cylinder is tighter than skeet by the next degree. Okay, now if you can see that target way down there, that's 35 yards away. Now 35 yards is considered to be pretty close range, I think, when you start looking at most shotgun books. You know, that's the inside range. Well, I can tell you what, I've shot plenty of pheasants, and I haven't had many get out farther than that. That's why I think most people tend to over-choke their shotgun. They tend to tighten up a little bit too much. You know, if you're going after pheasant, and you're shooting your pheasant at 30 to 35 yards away, which is a typical, you know, by the time they rise, get up in the air, you know, they're flushing under a dog or maybe underfoot, and they get up. That's quite a ways out there. I'm going to load up first of all with my first barrel. By the way, on a double barrel over and under, your first barrel is the bottom one, and that one there I'm going to load up with. That's going to be the improved cylinder at this range right here. So let's take a look and see what we do at 35 yards with improved cylinder. Okay, well, our bird got a little bit bigger. This is a pheasant, remember, a little bit bigger bird than a ruffed grouse. Generally speaking, it's acknowledged that 4 to 5 pellets that strike the body of a bird of any kind, 4 to 5 pellets is more than sufficient. Even quail, even less than that. But 4 to 5 pellets will put them down and out within striking range. In other words, not stray pellets or anything like that, but in the center of the pattern. So let's see how many pellets we struck this pheasant with, and I won't count the ones in the periphery, but the ones that are dead center. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, at least 10 pellets struck that bird. We can say would have certainly put him down. That was improved cylinder. So now we're going to go to modified, and I'm going to still shoot from 35 yards. In fact, I'm going to step it back another 5 yards, because if I were going afield with this shotgun here, I would choke it. If I were going out into a field, for a cornfield for pheasant, I'd choke it improved cylinder and then modified. So the improved cylinder would go off first, modified would go off second. That's one of the handy things about having a over and under or side by side double, is that you have two different chokes to work with. So as the bird is leaving you and getting farther away, 5 or 10 yards farther away, your second barrel is a little bit tighter. So I'm going to step back add another 5 yards to that, put it out to 40 yards, and we'll use the modified choke. I'm trying to show you the practical patterning of what a shotgun does rather than theoretical patterning. I'm not going to go through a demonstration of what all the different chokes do at one range, because that's of no consequence whatsoever. I'm trying to show to you what the viable patterns are for particular ranges. Okay, now we're out at 40 yards. We're quite a ways out. This is an extended shot in most areas. When you're taking a shot at a pheasant, you know, once in a while you get a pheasant that'll come up very, very far out, but it's very rare. You know, maybe you have a runner or something like that. But there's another dynamic that is always entering into the picture. Is we're not only dealing with shotgun choke, you know, constriction and the density of the pellets on paper, but the density of the pellets on paper also is a function of the shot charge. I've been using 1 1/8 ounce of shot right now. A popular shot charge for pheasant hunting is 1 1/4 ounce or even 1 3/8 of an ounce high velocity loads. You know, 1,270 feet per second, 1,300 feet per second, perhaps even. And if you compound that, you're adding more pellets. That's even making the pattern denser. So I'm sticking with one particular charge, which is just 1 1/8 ounce, just to show that particular aspect of the dynamic. There's also another thing that occurs when a bird is flying in flight. Basically it's a single plane. It's a two-dimensional target. Birds are not two-dimensional. They're in flight. They're not standing still. If you're shooting a pheasant standing on the cornfield or something, that's another thing. But a pheasant in flight is traversing through the air, and as the shot pattern is hitting him, it's not hitting him in a single plane like that. It's hitting him more in a elliptical pattern that's elongating as it's going through the air. It starts out from the muzzle as basically a ball of lead, and it continues to disperse in a elongated form, kind of on an elliptical form, and at the periphery those pellets become less powerful because they're on the edge where they were riding down the edge of the bore and being scuffed, or basically being flattened by the bore as they went through the choke. All these things. So the ones on the edge are the first ones to start falling off to the wayside and becoming less powerful, and they won't necessarily have the striking energy. The ones in the middle, remember now, are striking. It's called a shot string, and that shot string, as it is running through the air, some of those pellets are hitting the target before they're arriving on target before the others are. And also too, as the bird is flying through the air, if he's flying up away from you, if it's a pheasant flying up and away from you, then he's flying into the shot pattern, and if he's not flying into the shot pattern, you've missed him. But he should be basically intersecting the shot pattern as it's coming in on him. And as it does, he's flying through it, so he's not just catching the pellet that's in that single plane that you see, he's catching perhaps 2 or 3 pellets that would have otherwise missed him if he was just standing there. So there's all sorts of dynamics going on when you have individual projectiles that are being being flung out of a shotgun tube at moving targets. So it's a very evasive math. And you basically have to use a little bit of common sense. What you see here at 40 yards is I'm going to show you a modified choke, which is probably the most common choke size there is. That would be, as I showed you, that would be way too dense for any woodland hunting. And unfortunately, a lot of people, when they buy an all-purpose shotgun, that's exactly what they're buying. They're buying a shotgun that is extremely way too tight for any kind of practical hunting. They end up missing everything that comes up in front of them, and out as close as 30 yards they're still missing because you get such a small shot pattern. And when they do hit, they have the disappointment of having a ball of feathers and a very chewy bird. Okay, so let's load up. I'll fire this particular charge, and then we'll go down range and see what it did. Okay, now before I fired that last shot charge with the modified choke tube at 40 yards, I marked the previous pellets so we wouldn't be counting them again, so you can get a fair count. So now at 40 yards with a modified choke, 1 1/8 ounce of number 6s. That's a very moderate charge. It's not a light charge. It's not a field load with 7/8 of an ounce or 1 ounce, but it's a moderate shot charge. Probably a lot lighter than most people would buy. Most people would buy probably 1 3/8 ounces of shot, maybe number 6s or number 5s. Well, with 1 1/8 ounces, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. 22 out of only 5 or 6 pellets necessary to bring down a pheasant. So you have to always keep in mind that there are many dynamics going on when you're buying a shotgun and buying ammo for it, and what you're choking, how you're constricting your bore before you go out into the field. Don't just follow the standard math, because if you follow the standard math that so many books and magazine articles and so many gun writers will talk about, I haven't got a clue what sort of birds they're shooting, but to be shooting modified choke for the so-called all-American boar is totally off the wall. This is 40 yards away. That's a long shot. I've rarely had pheasants come up that far in front of me by the time they're taking to wing. Usually maybe they're 25 yards away when they take flight, and by the time I get my shotgun mounted, they're 30-35 yards away before I hit the trigger. Improved cylinder is more than sufficient for most shotgunning for pheasants. Now, one of the ideal things about an over and under is that you have, you can have an increasingly tighter tube So you fire your first shot off, it can be improved cylinder, and as the bird, if you didn't bring them down, the second barrel can be tighter and be modified choke. And that's why, you know, a second barrel, a double barrel shotgun has been so popular for bird hunters through the years. Or you might have a cover, you might have more than one bird coming up. So you have the first one, then you have the second one farther out. But think smaller than the average recommendation out there. You know, whatever the recommendation is, I find that generally you step it down by one choke tube designation. So, you know, if the common logic says modified choke for going out for pheasant, try improved cylinder. You're probably going to bring home more birds at the end of the day that you won't be missing, and you're certainly not going to be blowing so many up that are just going to be puffing, you know, feathers into the sky. So I'm going to leave this target up like this. I'm going to mark those. I'm going to mark those pellets, and we're going to step back. I'm going to mark these. Actually, I mark these with an X so we can discern these from the first ones. Now with that light, relatively light charge of shot, 1 1/8 ounce, and remember we only need to have 4 to 5 pellets per bird struck in order to ensure a good hit. Now I would probably, if I was shooting a pheasant load, I would typically take with me 1 3/8 ounce load, because, you know, if your distances are farther out and you're using a small or larger size shot like number 5s, you're going to have considerably fewer pellets per charge. You're going to have maybe about 50 or 60 pellets less per charge. That's for the whole thing. But I've got new pellets on paper here. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. At least 8 more pellets. At least 8 more pellets on this paper with only a 1 1/8 ounce load of number 6s at 50 yards with a full choke. So as you can see, if I stepped it up with and not only that, but number 5s would be, although the pattern would be more sparse, they tend to be a little bit more efficient ballistically and fly a little bit truer and disperse a little bit less. So, you know, this is how chokes work. And now this is a 48-inch piece of paper all the way across. Now I've had very, very few pellets that ever reach the periphery. I've got a few stray pellets that hit the very edge of the paper, but not very many. So as you can see, you know, when you're patterning your shotgun, try to keep in mind that most of the rules that attended to shotguns came about back in the days of paper shells before plastic wads that protected the pellets from scuffing against the bore, and before the technology of more improved choke design has evolved and things like that. So everything has gotten better. So choke constriction is more efficient than it used to be. Shot charges are more efficient than they used to be. This is magnum shot, in other words hardened shot, which I loaded. That's all I shoot, because I don't ever buy, you know, don't ever buy the inexpensive, you know, sale shotgun shells, because that stuff is all soft shot and you're not going to get this kind of patterning. However, if you're interested in maybe having very, you know, if you've got a tighter choke tube and you're stuck with it, if you buy the less expensive, you know, the promotional ammo, sometimes that softer shot will disperse a little bit quicker and give you a little bit more open pattern. So that's how this stuff works. Benny, here. Come on, boy. Here's my buddy. We're going to be getting out shotgun shooting pretty soon, huh? Yeah. He's a real blessing. Thank you for praying for us all. And my wife really appreciates it too. He's really our prize, and we really don't want to see him go prematurely. So hopefully God has given us a gift of some more time with him. Thank you so much for all your prayers and your thoughts, and for all your condolences. I received, I think, over 450 personal condolences to us. Very, very heartfelt thanks for all that. Thank you very much. Don't forget to subscribe too, and God bless. Atta boy. Atta boy. Look at the muddy mess you made yourself of, huh? Wow.